What's the title again? Global, no, our title. Materialities of global interdependence.
Welcome to Materialities of Global Interdependencies. And the final of this series, thank you for your patience. I think we finally sorted it out. So the series was thinking about actually how to think about the how to say the inseparability of land, body, finance, energy, infrastructure. And we began looking at the management of resources through things like the Critical Raw Materials Initiative. We then heard from Sophia Pickles about the particularities of the supply chain entanglements. And last week we looked at energy and how the materiality of energy is also very much important in this discussion as well. And the kind of politics it may afford. And this week, I am pleased to introduce Tekla, who will be speaking about or discussing the research-based artistic work that examines infrastructures as a materialization of socio-political borders as well as bargaining instruments in geopolitical negotiations. So following what we discussed last week, I think it's interesting to think not just how energy is transported and what form it takes, but also the infrastructures that transport it, sometimes, for example, the train. So following on from previous talks in the series, this talk will highlight how local and indigenous communities in the South Caucasus state development projects and how art can contribute to forging transnational camaraderies or comradeships. So I'd like to, by way of introduction, Tekla read their bio to you. And so Tekla Aslanishvili is an artist, filmmaker, and essayist based in between Berlin and Tbilisi. Her work emerges at the intersection of design, history, and geopolitics. Tekla's films have been screened and exhibited internationally, including the Taipei Biennale, the Orange Project Manila, Deals in Brussels, and also quite many more, such as Transmediale, Media in Oslo, Neue Berliner Künstlereien, and the list goes on and on. Also, Tekla has been a Digital Earth Fellow, a nominee for the Arts Bible Prize, and a recipient of the Han Nefkins Foundation, Fundación Antoni Tapier's Video Art Production Awards, and currently she's a postgraduate fellow at the Berlin Center for Advanced Studies in Arts and Sciences at the Berlin University of the Arts. So without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to Tekla.
Hello, thanks a lot for introduction. Do you hear me?
We can hear you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for introduction and thanks a lot for inviting and to everyone who came. I will be talking today about the infrastructures in the South Caucasus and Caspian regions and the way they are used in three different directions. Like, first of all, is the knowledge production, but also as technologies of sovereignty and statecraft, but also for the self-organization. So first of all, I will guide through these topics through my three documentary films. Two of them are accomplished projects already, so finalized projects. First is Scenes from Trial and Error, which looks at the construction of a deep sea port and a smart city in Anaklia, which is a small fisherman village on the Black Sea shores in West Georgia. State in a State that examines the railway infrastructures in the South Caucasus. So this is specifically a Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway line that connects the Baku fields of oil with the Kars in eastern Turkey through capital of Georgia. And I will be also speaking about my ongoing research-based documentary film that looks at the shifting energy geographies and specifically looking at the hydropower plants in the post-Soviet space. So in the presentation, I will not really be talking about the methodologies of filmmaking, but we can discuss this in the Q&A if you are interested, because I cannot really, like, we are not watching films, so that wouldn't make much sense. So I'll start with the first film. It's a scenes from Trial and Error. In this film, I'm following the multiple trials of developing the smart city and the port, as I mentioned already. And this is the seemingly quite insignificant project, because there has not ever been constructed anything that is truly functional in terms of logistics and smart city. But I think it is very good for artistic examination of the model itself, the way the spaces are constructed, and it's loaded with many symbolical elements. So first of all, because my focus in this presentation is on the technologies of sovereignty and infrastructures as this kind of mechanism to make nation states, I will start with this one aspect that is the site of Anaklia. So I think unfortunately you cannot hear the videos that I'm playing. We had a technical issue with this, but I'm just going to let it play. So first of all, just a second. I want to just show you the site itself. So this is, for example, this is the location of Anaklia. What is interesting about this place is that it is located in a close proximity to the administrative borderline between Georgia and Abkhazia. And this is a territory that has been at the center of conflict after the collapse of Soviet Union. And it is a contested territory. And I don't know, maybe some of you have read the novel by China Mieville. I don't know if it's the right way to pronounce his last name, but it's the novel City and the City. And there you have this border that is created. It's not really physical border, but it's something that is performative, created by this acts of seeing and unseeing the architectures of the respective sites. So it's kind of a mandatory acts of unseeing. So this is but in these moments of unseeing, somehow the citizens, these are two fictional cities, right? And citizens of one city can still take a glimpse of other city architectures, and this is also somehow how Anaklian borderline works So basically what the people who decided to build the smart city in Anaklia have decided or aimed for is that the people on the other side of the conflict zone will just take a look at the site of Anaklia, and this they just littered the whole shoreline with the multiple architectural elements. They have no function. It's just a performance of modernity that has been staged for this imaginative audience from the Abkhazian side, with the hope that they will, through these architectures, lure back people and reclaim the lost territories. So if we zoom in on the architectures of the place, so this is something that composes the smart city that they have started to build. These are three structural elements. One is the sculpture constructed by the Jürgen Meyer-Hermann, which is a German architect, the municipality building that has been constructed by the architects of invention, and the bit of the road that connects these two places. And I have used in this film this like embryo of the city. So there is nothing else. This is this embryo of the city. None of these buildings are functional. And I have used this in the film to speak about this like specific logics of, you know, planning and operating smart cities. But also like through the ruination of it, like they also hint towards the failures and errors that are integral part of such projects. And my collaborator on this work and also on the next project, Evelina Gambino, had her whole book written about logistics and how error is integral part of it. But so what I wanted to pay attention to is that like what actually these architectures do. It was the trials of developing the smart city in Anaklia has happened like many times. The idea of developing it existed already in Soviet Union. And after the collapse of, like, it was just the plans, like some maps, like they have not really done proper research. But after the collapse of Soviet Union, somehow there was this urge for Georgia to find again the place that it, like Georgia could have in the modern world. And they have started to, like the new governments like Shevardnadze and Saakashvili in 2011 started to source this idea for the new role of the country from kind of a semi-mythical history of Georgia when it was central to the Silk Road, ancient Silk Road. And they wanted to kind of transform the country into a transit hub. And one way to do this was, of course, to, you know, aestheticize it, but also they started to like source some of the stories from even the mythical history of Georgia. And one of my favorite stories in this direction was when Saakashvili was telling to the media outlets how he was sailing with the maritime cutter in Anaklia, and like suddenly he was like suddenly his cutter broke down and he was like almost drowning in the sea, and local fishermen came to save him. And in this moment of, you know, salvation from the sea and in moment of danger, he kind of awakened to the beauty of Anaklia and saw its shoreline and realized that it had, you know, enormous potential for economic growth and prosperity. And this is something that echoes the story of the Argonauts, this from the Greek mythology. And in that story of the Greek mythology, they are the leader of the Argonauts, Jason, who, like, he also was saved by the local fishermen. And in this moment, he discovered the kingdom of Colchis, which is modern day Georgia. And like then he realized that there was infinite potential for economic growth and this, you know, country rich with iron, gold, and so on. So what President Mikhail Saakashvili did, that he kind of went back to the foundational story of Georgia, this like moment when Georgia met the modernity in the mythical history. He placed himself in it, and like somehow he created this kind of mythological vibe around this project. And his trial of developing the city failed in 2012, and then in 2016, the next government, Georgian Dream, started to work on this project again. So what they have done is that they have commissioned a Georgian bank, TBC Bank, and they this consortium was also composed of Conti International, which was the US based company. And they were very different in their approach. They were not anymore creating this kind of mythological vibe around it, but they were advertising themselves as a company that is very pragmatic. They would not build any architectures that were not, you know, justified economically, and they were always talking about the calculable futures and that everything had to be measured, and they did all the preliminary studies and feasibility studies and so on, and they started to dig out like 5 million cubic meters of sand from the seabed. But what turned out is that like they did it while not having secured the funding for the next stages of the project. So basically, they wanted the Georgian government to secure all the risks that they might have in case of not enough revenues, which Georgian government then disagreed to. So they kind of like left the project. Until today, they are in the legal dispute with the Georgian government. So what I wanted to also address, like, unfortunately, like I cannot play these videos with sound, so I need to improvise a bit. But like what I wanted to pay attention to is like how this kind of speculative approach of like dealing with a space as if it was empty, and like the ways in which it has been you know, the local populations like have been treated as if they were not there. But actually, like this kind of approach has really reshaped, and this like anticipation for the project has like really reshaped the ways people started to deal with their own spaces and with their own territories. Yeah, we cannot hear this, but like this house is, for example, there is like this story that like my collaborator Vina Gambino is telling in the film, which I will have to tell you now because we cannot hear it. Is that so for example, this is the house. This is the house right next to the border where the 5 million cubic meters sand has been dredged from. So this house was built from the money that the local person has received as a compensation. So of course, like to dredge the sand and create space for the port, like a lot of people had to be relocated from the territory, and like they received quite good compensations for it. And with these compensations, most of them started to buy the land right next to the port territory. And this guy, like what he did is that he built house like in an immediate proximity to the port. And the local population started to speculate that this was done because he was operated on different regimes. Like one was of the hope and another was of the fear, and hope that like if the project so what is specific about this house is that like it's built in a very unpleasurable place, but also at the same time, if you enter the house, it's like a dream house. Like he has fully invested all his fantasies and imaginations into this house. So basically what is interesting about this project is that it shows very well how people kind of speculate on both kind of scenarios. One is that if the project will be finalized, I mean the port and the smart city, then he will like, you know, end up with the house of his dreams. But if, you know, if it will extend also, then he might get like more compensation. So you have this kind of like different modes and regimes of living that you can witness on the side. But like to come back to the architectures that were built on site. So I have mentioned that this is the architecture by Yogamaya Herman. This was commissioned in 2011. And what is interesting about this architect is that Mikhail Saakashvili, the president of Georgia, was obsessed with his work. So in Georgia, every place that is important in terms of logistics and responsible for moving goods and people is dotted with the architectures of this guy. So it's like gas stations, even the checkpoint checkpoint at the border between Turkey and Georgia and Sarpi, and there is like the slide before. This is the railway station in Halkalaki. And so, as I mentioned, like Saakashvili was obsessed with his architectures because visually it was speaking about the ways he imagined to transform the country. And after I finished the first project about the port, this architect got in touch with me and asked me if I could share with him the link, and I wanted to ask him to share his experience with working with Georgian government instead. And he agreed to it, and like he mentioned that the idea of like designing the whole, logistic spaces was that Georgia, after the collapse of Soviet Union, wanted to reshape itself from this like country of good wine and food and so on into a country of into transit hub. So because you experience the country through roads, the idea of Saakashvili was to redesign aesthetically this like whole experience. And about this, so this is like this architect was actually how I transitioned my focus from the port project to the railway project. So basically, he designed the architecture of the next large-scale infrastructure project, which was Baku-Tbilisi-Kars Railway. And about this project, he mentioned that like one important aspect about this is that different scales are coming together. And this is something that is quite important for this territory itself. For example, like this Baku-Tbilisi-Kars Railway in the territory where it passes Georgia, the main central station of it, is where the Soviet like larger size gauges are meeting the railways of the European standard gauge sizes. And this is something that is also manifested in aesthetics of the place, and something that I thought was a disadvantage for the place. So there are like two reasons why this could be a disadvantage, like because like two sizes of gauges are meeting each other. You need to reload like one cargo from one train, cargo from one train to another one. And this kind of course, needs time, and it delays the transit time. But later I realized like this aspect is exactly what creates the like economic value for this project, and what makes it kind of interesting place to invest in. So this is why like a lot of countries in the South Caucasus are trying to have this kind of reloading location on their side, and this is how it has become like kind of option, like location of the dispute. But maybe, okay, so I will just a second. Audrey?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you please prepare the video that is with the blue one with snow, but like don't play this yet, please.
Okay. 1 moment.
I cannot hear you.
Is she supposed to hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Sorry.
Audrey?
Where did it go? Yeah, sorry. Right, this one? No, it's the snow one. This one.
So okay, I cannot hear you, but like I will just tell you that like the one aspect why this project is very important is that like of course it is something that is central to the middle corridor of the New Silk Road. But like foundation of it is very like when you zoom onto this project, the way it works is very different. For example, so one thing to know about this railway that is quite important is that this was founded on a conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia that happened right after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And this conflict, in a way, resulted in disrupting the railway links that existed between Turkey and Armenia, but also Azerbaijan and Armenia. And they both countries started to invest in Georgia. Audrey, can you play the video?
You're muted, by the way. It's a different video.
Мы общались с турецким начальником станции каждый день. Тоже такой человек, как я. Хорошие отношения. Поехали, чай пили там. Посидели по работе, разговаривали, маневры сделали, вагоны сняли и до свидания сказали, вернулись. Мы общались с турецким начальником станции каждый день. Тоже такой человек, как и я. Хорошие отношения. Поехали, чай пили там. Посидели по работе, разговаривали, маневры сделали, вагоны сняли и до свидания сказали, вернулись. В 1993 году, 11 июня, он приехал, говорит, нам из руководства Турецкой Республики письмо, что этот переход у нас временно закрывается. И это письмо привезли и отправили начальнику танка. И все. Ничего нету, они заранее не имеют. И уже 28 лет будем ждать еще.
Saptakamşıyız. Taşlı şehirler. Devam. Telefonumuz bir şehirler. Çamlıklarında oğlu ve doğru regionში არსებული სავაჭრო ტერიტორიები. ერთი სამხრეთი ჩრდილოეთი, ირანის სამხრეთი რუსეთი, მეორე თურქეთი, საქართველო, აზერბაიჯანი. ან იმის გამო რომ სულხეთს ეკონომიკურად ჩაკეტილი იყო თურქეთის და აზერბაიჯანის უზრდელი საქართველოში არის იყოს მართვის გამოვანი ტერიტორია.
Has it finished? Okay, I cannot hear you, so I'm just going to continue with it. This is like quite important aspect about this project, and also the problem is that when you have like one thing that like when I started working about this project on this project is that like my research collaborator Evelina Gambino went to Armenia, and like one of the veteran Armenian railway workers told her that the railway was what made the Soviet Union equal. And this is the idea that is also echoed in the Xi Jinping's One Belt, One Road initiative, that like we have to revive the Great Silk Road through, you know, economic collaboration that gives everyone the like same opportunities to be part of it. And of course, like this project as well, Baku-Tbilisi Kars Railway project as well, is also advertised, and you know it has become central to the Belt and Road initiative for the middle corridor of it. But like this is what we see when we zoom onto this project. This is how in reality this project works. And even after the second Nagorno-Karabakh war in 2020, the same transport infrastructures of exclusion became also the main negotiation tool, a bargaining chip war over the territories, as this like promise of reopening the Baku-Tbilisi, the Kars-Gyumri line and inclusion of Armenia into the transport links of the region was what conditioned the ceasefire. And but like it also, like, what is interesting is that when we look at the Georgian context, it seems like Georgia kind of indirectly profited from this this project, and that it has only economic interest. But that's not true, actually, because when I was doing this research, I had a communication with one of the experts who was teaching also in the railway college of Tbilisi. And she was telling me that even if there is zero economic profit from this project, it's still worth it for Georgia, because one thing to know about this project is that on the Georgian territory, it passes Samtskhe-Javakheti region, and Samtskhe-Javakheti region is the place that is populated to 98% of ethnic Armenians, and it is known to have separatist tendencies. And this is something that, you know, like a lot of people in Georgia are, you know, urging the government to try to integrate the local population into economic life of the country through, you know, like knowledge and education, and, you know, giving them different opportunities. But instead of it, like, Georgian government has turned to infrastructures as means of control and securing its sovereignty. So basically what this railway experts, like this person, told me is that there is something in this contract signed between three countries, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Georgia, that gives Azerbaijan and Turkey opportunity to intervene militarily in the name of protecting the common infrastructures in case of any separatist movements in the region. So this is like how actually on this ground these railway infrastructures work, and the local population on site, like, they might not be understanding of all this importance and layers of the process, but they are definitely aware that it is in a way a technology of power and control, because they have been completely cut off from this project. Like around 5,000 people have tried to find jobs and like get employed on this project, but according to the local journalists, ethnic Armenian journalists, they have it came out unofficially that, like, in the list of the applicants, there were not supposed to be Armenian last names, and you know, it's a quite cynical situation because you know, 98% of a population, as I said, is ethnic Armenian. So this is one aspect that we should pay attention to in this project. So to go to the next thing, also, you know, this situation kind of also repeats itself in the context of the you know, profiting indirectly from the territorial conflicts of the region. Audrey, can you maybe play this video? But like, it's fine, don't play. I'm just going to play it mutely, and I'll talk over it. So what happened after the war, like Russian invasion in Ukraine, is that you know, like, all the cargo that was passing from China through Russia and like coming into Europe, all this cargo has been relocated to south, to the middle corridor. So like now you have the celebration of you know, the narratives and like kind of celebration of increase of cargo, and like yet again the country has indirectly profited from this conflict. But at the same time, you have a situation where the drivers of the cargo drivers, because the country cannot process these many trucks, the drivers are standing in line for up to 2 weeks sometimes, like without basic facilities and like kind of dealing with the situation. So the like film in a way shows this kind of celebratory narratives, but also the realities that are created on the peripheries of these opportunities. Another important aspect of this film, which is central, is a state in a state, like which comes from the historic role of the railway that was formed in the Soviet Union. So when we were talking, as I mentioned, like Evelina, my collaborator, when she went to Armenia, it was said to her that the railway was what made Soviet Union equal. And also in my research, like most of the railway workers, the veterans, were saying that in Soviet Union, the railway was a state in a state. And this was because it was, it had a way better working logistics and infrastructure than the state outside of it, I mean the Soviet Union. So it had its own phone codes, its own social infrastructure like kindergartens and schools, and everything basically was working in a much better way. So this created like very strong sense of solidarity and kinship between the people of the different Soviet republics who were working, living around the railways. And after the collapse of Soviet Union, these infrastructures have become the foundations for very strong senses of solidarity. And like in a way, the railway workers started to work against the will of and like political decisions of the nation states, which were often based on the political violence. Can we play the next video?
Yes, 1 second. Can you ask her which is the next?
It's the video is called Timothy Mitchell. Actually, before you play, I'm just going to say like this one more thing. Like this aspect of solidarity was manifested in a way that, like, for example, when Armenia was in a blockade, like Armenian railway workers and Turkish railway workers were still using the connections and like their friendships to overcome the blockade in the country. So the country Armenia was like facing the humanitarian crisis. So Turkish railway workers would still let the trains with bread pass over the borders. And this kind of like sense of solidarity was also seen in the war between Ukraine and Russia, or Russian invasion in Ukraine. So now we can play the video, please.
I think it's a wonderful example, really helpful way to think about this whole question of political consciousness and class consciousness. Once you focus on the infrastructure, you have a better way of thinking about something like political consciousness, because it doesn't have to be something floating at some separate level of culture that has to sort of build its own sphere of operation. It's built into, encouraged, and made possible by that shared work on a railroad. And it's not just because people abstractly share a common kind of experience, they're actually connected together because the thing has to work as a connected system. The political possibilities that arise from that knowledge of the connected system and how you can interrupt the connections and how you can break down the connections. In both normal working and in moments of political organization, you don't have to sort of worry about, explaining consciousness as a problem. You can understand it as connectedness through shared actions and activities and so on.
Finished, right? I'm sorry, it's a bit hard to navigate for me the whole presentation while not knowing, when it starts and finished. But I'll just like play mutely this next video and like speak over it. So like this kind of this type of agency of intervening in politics has a long history, not only in this region, but also like if we talk about the socialist revolutions in 1905 and 1917 October revolutions, the strike and like sabotage of locomotive drivers played a very important role. So this beyond this like class consciousness, the very material transnational consciousness was grown on the infrastructural body of the railway. And this memory of solidarity is also something that we can witness today, as I said, in this war. Because what is happening during this war is that there are minor acts of sabotage, like breaking the signalization boxes of the railway that are slowing down the movement of Russian weaponry and troops from Russia to Ukraine via Belarus. So this is like kind of this is happening in a result of the collaboration between Ukrainian railway workers with Belarusian railway workers. And this kind of coordinated acts of sabotage are little signs that, you know, like on this material body of the railway that was founded in many ways on violence, and like initial intentions were not like to really give the equal opportunities to people, but the people who are working on these railways are practicing their own politics and are kind of putting their own sense into these infrastructures. So from this, I'm going to move to the last project. This is something that I'm working now, and this is an artistic research in which I will produce a documentary film. And specifically, I'm looking at the energy infrastructures in the South Caucasus, and I look at them while thinking about how they are materialized and like utilized to work as an organizational mechanism in three areas. First is production of knowledge, the making and unmaking of the national borders, and practices of statecraft. So in many ways, it is a continuation of my previous work. And so the main trigger of starting working on this project was the Black Sea cable project. So this is a new energy bridge that will transmit the renewable energy of the Caspian through Georgia under the Black Sea to the Europe, Romania and Hungary. So this project is at a stage of, this is the part of the EU Global Gateway initiative, which is counter to the China's Belt and Road initiative. And it aims to create kind of like sustainable connections that work for people and the planet. And it's at the stage of feasibility study. But like, although this project is really at the start, it's still already like starting to reshape the social and physical realities in Georgia, because what happened is that this kind of anticipation of this project has prompted Georgia to reinvent itself as an energy hub now, because we are very rich in water, hydro resources. So this has reactivated a lot of dam projects that had been halted due to protests, actually like from the last years, like before the collapse of Soviet Union, but also in the recent years. And this is why I started to already follow this project, and I'm developing this mainly in three directions, as I said. And like, first, knowledge production is something that has also personal significance to me. So it looks at the restructuring of the knowledge production around the hydropower plants. What is interesting about the knowledge production and the hydropower plants is that like the new energy geographies emerged from the industrial politics of the USSR, and these are the critical sites where the tensions between the tacit knowledge of living with the nature that comes from very intimate acts of labor and the abstractive like scientific abstraction can be observed. And starting from the 1930s, the Soviet government launched a general attack on the community of Soviet scientists and technical intelligentsia. And after that, you know, like this intelligentsia was, of course, perceived by the Stalin's government as a threat to the party. So they were kind of concentrated on creating their own scientific class. Why this is like important personally for me is that my whole family belongs to this new scientific class. So basically my grandparents and their whole families, they were just like these people in the rural areas of Georgia, and they were brought out and given the opportunity to become a scientist. Like, you know, my grandfather was a electric engineer. My grandma was one of the first waves of the cyberneticians of the Soviet Union, and all of these people have been kind of like deployed to serve as this like you know, scientific body behind the project of Soviet industrialization. And what is interesting when we look at this kind of reorganization of knowledge production around the energy infrastructures is that you have people who have seemingly very incompatible skills with each other. For example, my grandfather on the one side could kind of like catch salmons under the rocks, but at the same time he was able to like develop scientific technologies that would help fishes to navigate the dams, and like this kind of, you know, attention in one person, and this kind of this is interesting actually, because on a later stage when you had this kind of resistance of the local communities against the construction of dams, often they were based on, you know, very intimate act of labor and of living with the nature, as I mentioned already. But like during the Soviet Union and like post-Soviet years, this kind of knowledge was, you know, in a way discriminated or delegitimized even as, you know, backwards and so on. But I'm really interested to understand this history of how this has been restructured, but also to understand like what it means to have, like what are the potentialities of this kind of manufacturing of the scientific class. And similarly to a state in a state where, you know, like the technologies of violence gave birth to something that was, you know, more interesting and more, you know, in terms, in like in a way giving a social potentialities. I'm also interested to find this and research this through, you know, personal archives and my you know, family memories and so on. Another aspect, of course, that is very interesting for this project is weaponization of rivers. We have like many examples how you know, intentional flooding of the dams have been used in wars. But also like there is very interesting work of for example, Ivor Duncan on how the rivers are weaponized and how they are like strategies, part of a border management and, you know, managing the refugee flows and so on. But like what I'm interested in this project is like how the hydropower plants are acting as extra state entities. What is interesting about this project is that here you can see the images, the Anguri hydropower plant, and this is sitting at the administrative border between Georgia and Abkhazia. This is again the disputed territory that I mentioned in the first project of the court. So this, like, you know, that the hydropower plants are very complex entities. They are composed of multiple components. And what is interesting about this project is that after the collapse of Soviet Union and the war between Georgia and Abkhazia, the powerhouse of the hydropower plant ended up sitting on the Abkhazian controlled territory, and the rest of the body of the dam was on Georgian territory. So this, until today, this dam is only thing around which there is an official communication between these two countries. And like there are some documentary films, like here is also a still from the documentary film by Mara Diazawa, and this kind of shows that crossing the material kind of like border, or geographic border between these two places is actually quite easier or more easy through the material body of infrastructure, its tunnels and so on, than through official passing of, like applying for a visa or something. That process is way more complicated than, using the material body of the dam. So this is something that I'm looking at in this project. And another aspect is the aspect of the statecraft and self-organization. So this is, I think I'm way over my time. Can I finish this? Or I think my PowerPoint is showing already 50 minutes, but we have lost some time. So, Audrey?
Can you hear me? No. Oh, sorry.
I cannot hear you.
That's because I had no headphones on. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay, try now.
Now I can hear you.
No. I think the problem.
Can you hear me? But I cannot hear you. You were back, but now I lost you again.
Okay.
Now I can hear you. Now I can hear you.
Okay, so sorry about this, and also about the stress of having to deal with my fiddly hands as I'm putting your video on. I can't really see you, but I think at this point, this is, connection enough. So thanks very much, Tekla, for presenting your work and also giving a lot of research context. I had the pleasure of seeing Tekla's work, specifically the screening of a state in a state in Brussels at Wiels. And I got to see the longer version of it. And I think that's one thing that I found quite amazing about both the presentation today and the work in general is this ability to, is that me? No, okay. The ability to think about the complexity around infrastructure, but not just like, for example, when you were saying, okay, railway makes the country equal. So there was this, we've heard this narrative in many countries, of course, and there's this kind of narrative of it will give opportunity and make the country equal. And you show very well how that in a way becomes more of a bargaining chip than something else, and also used for, of course, for trade and the importance of that, and also how, of course, infrastructure in the end is about control and sovereignty. So I think that comes out very well in your work in the different sort of excerpts of projects that you showed. And what I really appreciated from the excerpt that you showed from Estate in Estate, and also perhaps maybe some that I saw outside of this, is showing how the infrastructure also creates solidarity. So Timothy Mitchell was talking about how it creates a political consciousness and a connectedness. But I really appreciate this part of the work that shows how the railway workers, even though they may live in different places, and some don't even see each other physically, they have a connection and they have a solidarity. And there are these beautiful moments where in one country there's, I believe there's an earthquake, and then the railway workers from another area, from another country, will come to help them get out of the rubble, to give them food. So I'm rambling now, but I wanted to maybe switch over to a question about this, because I think it's such a beautiful thing about your work that it's not only showing the kind of complexities of why infrastructure is important and why, for example, Georgia is going from, as you were saying, like a country of, you know, good food and so on, turning towards infrastructure and having this kind of architect making, you know, the railway station and all these infrastructural elements are becoming so important. But I find the solidarity building quite interesting. So maybe that's something that you would like to say a little bit more about.
Yeah, so this aspect of solidarity is actually something that has come up a bit later in the research of the project, because while I was working on it, so the idea was to finish the work with the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War. But then, as I was already like in the process of finishing, you know, like in the rough cut, basically, this is when the solidarity acts between Belarusian and Ukrainian railway workers emerged. But at the same time, I had this like narratives, very pragmatic ones, about the increase of cargo on the Georgian territory. So this was something that was kind of making me sad, because people, of course, like no one really directly celebrated the war. Georgian people have very strong sense of solidarity with the Ukrainian people, but at the same time, there was kind of an indirect profit from this war, and very dry kind of narratives, and it made me really sad. And like once, and I went back to my recordings that I collected from the conversations with Armenian railway workers, but also with Georgians, and I tried to kind of like move away the dust from these acts of solidarities to, in a way, kind of like bring it back and highlight. And then you know, like it kind of was a very good rounding up that also this started to happen again between the Belarusian and Ukrainian railway workers. So I kind of, in a way, wanted to also remind all the people who have been part of this technical infrastructures that there can be different kind of politics, and like not this kind of like pragmatic narrative on logistical profit and so on, but like to really remind people who have been part of these communities to think about it and like not forget what it really meant to be, you know, part of this like very strong, because railway workers do have very strong identity. They used to have, not anymore maybe now, but they used to have. So I wanted to really bring that back to attention.
I must say, I really appreciate how it seems to me that a lot of this work is about bringing the tacit knowledge, the context of tacit knowledge around these infrastructures, which are obviously part of this narrative that is very scientific and pragmatic. And so I really appreciate that you know, you're bringing these communities and the tacit knowledge around it back to it. And I think that when you said the scientific measure in pragmatism, I think the example of the smart city that you started with was beautiful. It was probably the most extreme example of smart city fiasco I've seen. Well, perhaps not the most extreme, but very, very extreme. I'm trying to remember, you said something really fantastic where you said that in Anaklia, this smart city is absolutely not functional. It was a kind of almost a ghost of sculptures, but it is good for art research because in a way it reveals the logics of the smart city and perhaps other logics as well. And I just wanted to come back to that because I thought that something completely dysfunctional but could be good for art research to be quite beautiful and evocative. And I wondered if you could expand a little bit about that.
Why this is good for artistic research, you mean, or?
Yeah, because it's somehow amazing to find the use in such a wasteland of sculptures which become like very symbolic. And I'm wondering in what way that became really productive for you in terms of art research, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think they are kind of like, if you don't know what they are, it's very hard to make sense of this place, because you go there and like in the first encounter, you just see a very desolated land. So there are just like some confused animals like walking around, not many houses because most of people have been relocated, and there is the festival, electronic music festival, and which is right next to the border that I have shown, taking place. This is also part of the performance of modernity staged for the Abkhazians. So you have this kind of residues of many different things. And when you go there, while none of these kind of places are active, you don't quite understand what these places are. And this happened to me in 2016. I went to this place and I encountered this urban triangle that I have mentioned, composed of the three main pillars, and I didn't really understand what I was looking at. I knew this, idea of Saakashvili of building the futuristic smart city, but no one really took it seriously. And later, I think a year later or two, I was listening to the talk by Tekla Aslanishvili where she was showing the kind of a reel of the videos that she calls the urban porn, contemporary urban porn. And these are the renderings of the smart cities that are copy-pasted from one place to another. And one of the videos was of the Lazika city, which would be the name of the place that I was filming if it was built. So I kind of then could link this theory with the place, and like I started to see in this like little elements that were composing the city, all the ideas that were part of the theory. So I kind of could make sense suddenly of a place, but also there is this, I went back and I thought there is a potential of talking about this theory and about this model and principles of way these places are planned and where they are thought to operate. And there is potential to talk about that, but like when I went on site, I just saw that they have, extra layers to it. And that layer is something that Evelina has worked on, for example, that to integrate the failure into the model as well. And that was like the images that you see in the film also, and that I encountered were the images of a very specific failure, where you're kind of like, because like the animals and the houses and people, they are really there. And all the narratives that exist about these places do not include the images of the people, like they are kind of there. So I wanted to kind of use all the narratives, everything that can be said about the place by the architects, by the planners, by the people who critically examine these places, to include them and run them against the images that are flowing in the film, and like kind of build the whole structure around this tension that is created between the narration of what place is and between the images of it. So this is why I thought it was a useful place to, aesthetically animate the idea, but also very specific failure.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm wondering if it's maybe a moment to open it up to questions.
which I can happily repeat.
Thank you so much for a very interesting presentation. I really enjoyed it. And I really like the multiplicity of that geographical complication. Can you hear me? Probably will be a question. I have a question. Yes. I'm wondering about the term transition, because it seems that Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and maybe, of course, Iran even, somehow they are always in the permanent state of transition. And I'm wondering that how transition, that kind of liminal space between two things, plays in your work. And also, I have the second question too, that how it's very much related to your practice and methodology that you work as a film essay and you introduce yourself as essays. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a bit further. So what does it mean in your practice?
Okay, we may do it in two parts if that's okay, because I'm not sure I remember all of it. Tekla, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I didn't hear everything from the question.
Yes,
So
I will endeavor to repeat. You correct me. So essentially, the first part of the question is about transition and what role does transition have in your work? Namely, because you're looking, for example, at spaces of transition between, for example, not Georgia and Armenia, but Armenia, Russia, and Iran, or Turkey, Georgia, and I forget the third place. Azerbaijan, sorry. So what is the role of transition in, just a second, in?
Is it possible to see that notion of sort of permanent state of transition in her research somehow?
You said sort of permanent form of transition. Is it possible to see this sort of permanent mode of transition in your work, in your research?
yeah, so I think this is coming from the topics that are researched themselves, because I mainly look at transit infrastructure spaces. So the ports and the railways, and now in this like last research case is the energy transition. So but this is the idea. You cannot make sense of any infrastructural space that is about the transit of goods and people and so on by looking at one place only. I mean, this is my approach. Of course, there are like lots of films who completely focus on one place, but like for me, it's very important to show them, you know, to zoom on the local context, but also have a picture of, you know, a bigger context of where the things come from and how do they relate to other places. So, for example, in the film A State in a State, I have used a transition in a way and like this multiplicity of locations as a methodology. So I'll just go, I think I should have somewhere like, for example, the film is starting from my bedroom view, because I was raised next to the railway line that is main railway line of Georgia. And like I kind of like, I know everything about this district. I know everything that, you know, happens around it, the way people are. But also, like I was saying that if you look closely enough and long enough at this railway line, you can kind of extract certain kind of information, what kind of cargo is transferred in what quantities and so on. So this is something that I have used as a methodology, because this railway line, especially when I was filming it, it was COVID time and it was wartime between Azerbaijan and Armenia. So I was not able to enter lots of territories and I couldn't transit. For example, Azerbaijan was in a complete lockdown. So what I have done is that I used this kind of a chain of researchers and told them that like they could also tell the stories of the places that we're looking at. So in the film, you have this multiple narration of people who are looking at the same railway line, but in Azerbaijan, or same railway line, but in Armenia. So this is how I kind of decided or tried to compose and like collage the whole story, the infrastructural story. And but there is, of course, you know, in the film, you see the transition itself, because I'm traveling all the time through this railway. Every place that I was able to physically visit, I did so. I went to Kars in Turkey, I went to Gyumri in Armenia, and you like the whole film shows this kind of movement with the line and tells the stories along this line. So this is, I think, central to this work, but also to other works as well. And the other question?
Well, it was about essay and film essay, and if to get a little more elaboration on that methodology.
The difference between essay and film essay.
I'm just wondering that how to bring it into film essay, which you introduce yourself as essays. So I'm just wondering that the relationship perhaps between artistic essay and film essay.
Could you say something about the relationship between artistic research and film essay, partially because you present yourself as such?
Yeah, so I was I'm actually trained as an artist, not as a filmmaker, but like I studied with Hito style, and I did have like a lot of influence of the essayistic cinema, also, you know, like Harun Faruqi's work and so on. So I do come from that background. But what I want to, like, what I'm interested in, and how I want to link this essayistic cinema, essayistic experimental documentary with the research-based practice is to, in a way, kind of disrupt the monological, or like, how to say, so I just don't want to do the research alone. First of all, I'm a very collaborative person, and I don't want to channel in a very didactic way only my findings. So I kind of wanted to disrupt this like classical essayistic style by multiplying the voices. So this is what I'm doing in the film. So when I'm doing the research, I speak with a lot of researchers, but also a lot of people who are working and living around the projects that I'm looking at, and I'm using it's like a data collection, the way that I work. I go in the field, I record as many people as possible, while quite often not even being able to understand like what they're actually saying, because in this kind of process of being on the move, and we know with all this equipment and everything, like you cannot always comprehend what people are telling you. So I collect all this data and I talk with as many people possible as possible. And then I, you know, like when I start transcribing the whole footage, like this is when actually the story starts to make sense. Like I transcribe everything, I really learn my material, and I do take, you know, the stand of authorship. It's not like type of documentary when I would just like outsource the whole responsibility of what is being said to, you know, other people. It's still like my story and the way I make sense of the data that I have collected. But at the same time, I want to have these layers, you know, like it has to be as complex as possible. So I don't know, like this is, I think, the way research translates into the essayistic cinema in my specific work, like, or yeah, in my work specifically. Yeah, I don't know if it answers to your question.
Yes, thank you very much. Is there another question? Please show your hand so you may bring the microphone. Please come here to the room.
Hi, Tekla. So
no.
what happened? Okay. Hi. So I'm going to ask you a question from here. And it takes up the methodology question. So because we're speaking to programs of practitioners, fine art practitioners, I often see a struggle with people trying to do long form projects for quick turnaround in exhibition spaces. So in terms of methodology, I was wondering if you could speak to timelines in your projects, in your essays, because it seems to me that the work that you do, like the intensive research, requires a lot of commitment, and it's like maybe, is it multi-month? Is it multi-year projects? And sort of how to keep that going through the pressures of exhibition formats and the display mechanisms and so on. And then the second question is around access, because I was wondering how, if you're speaking to, you've addressed speaking to people who are affected by these various infrastructure projects. But I was wondering if there's attempts to access the power actors, like the people who operate them, the people who are running the companies and so on, and how you go around thinking about accessing participants in the films who aren't necessarily sympathetic to what you're trying to do with it.
Yeah. So just a second. Yeah, so in terms of the timeline, all of my projects are long-term projects. So I work at least for 2 years on each of them. So it starts like, but the thing with my projects is that they very organically grow into each other. I think that is kind of clear from my presentation. I hope so. But the thing is that there is always a pressure when you're an artist of exhibiting, like no one is waiting for 2 years for you to finalize the project. So one thing that happens to me quite often is the projects overlap. Like, for example, the post-production of one film overlaps with the production of the second and so on, which is a quite stressful thing. Not advise anyone to do this. But but what I do is also versioning. Like, for example, before I finalize the project, the things that I find, but because also they are very complex and like multi-layered, there are many aspects that I could speak about. I take out one thing and I do, like either a 13 minutes version of something, like a video that will be screened in a video exhibition, or the lecture performance that is in, a more semi-academic context. So I always do this versioning of the work before I finalize them. But even if they are finalized, for example, the port project, it has 2 versions that are like, one is the full-length film that is mainly shown in universities, especially for the people who are interested in the smart city and port, like logistics infrastructures and architecture. And the other is, something that runs in the festival. This is also one problem that you have with, there is a relationship between the film festivals and the exhibition spaces, that films that are over 30 minutes are hard to show in the exhibition context. So there is another layer of versioning as well. It is like, it sounds stressful, but like it's kind of fun to version the films, because you can always work on something more excessively, because like there is only limited amount of things that you can address in one film, and this versioning allows me to do that. And regarding the access, it's actually, I talked about my family, and that they have been, part of this like Soviet plan of creating new scientific class from the proletariat and rural areas and so on. So like all my family has been part. Like, for example, one project that I have not presented is a collaboration between me and artist Georgi Kakoshidze, which looks at the manganese mining industries. So for that project, when we went into the manganese mines and the ferroalloy plants and so on, and this was done basically through the connections of my grandmother, which is like we were practically, we didn't go through with any of the official access applications. It was impossible because these places are in decay and, you know, no one wants you there. But like the sister of, or a friend of my grandma, like literally went knocking on the director's door, saying that you need to let these people in and let them film. So there's like this kind of things like still run as a family connection thing. But for example, if it's a port, the port construction company, they were advertising themselves as company who is, you know, very eco-friendly and, you know, using the smart infrastructures to make everything, you know, it was kind of a greenwashing strategy. So they were still in a planning phase. So they didn't damage that much yet. So they allowed me to access everything. Like all the planning meetings and everything, every step I was able to follow. With railway, it was terrible. I didn't have access to anything because it is a strategic project, first of all, like geopolitically, and it is geopolitically complicated project. It's more like more of a political project than the economic one. So no one wanted to talk to me about this. So with every film, you have to adapt and change the strategy according to what you have access. So yeah, this is how it works.
Thanks for sharing your process in versioning systems, and also I feel very underrated family access, or under discussed the importance of family access to informal networks. If there are no other questions.
Audrey, you should come
Yes.
here and speak to.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I already forgot that I have to speak here for you to hear me. Sorry, Tekla. I was just thanking you for sharing the methodologies around the work, but also how you share the work and also family access. And I was suggesting to conclude, also because our session has gone slightly longer than normal. And I wanted to thank you also, not just for your patience through all of this, but also for really elucidating how infrastructure also shapes knowledge production, I think, in a very important way. And also, of course, for sharing your work with us. So please join me in thanking Tekla for her contribution.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. And I also apologize. I think I rushed through the whole presentation because I couldn't like really follow in a planned way my my presentation. So I hope that it was not like too confusing for the viewers.
No, absolutely. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I just wanted to say, I know